All right, we are live. Sorry, guys. Today was a crazy day, so I am recording this video pretty late. You'll get it in the morning and prepare for your exam. So good luck, or your quiz, rather. Good luck. We're on chapter 35. We are working through didomy, the non-indicative. And you can tell that Mounts kind of moves through this first section of this chapter really quick because the non-indicative of didomy is actually pretty easy. The learning curve is learning the didomy in the indicative. Didomy in the indicative has a little bit different stuff. You remember the present tense redupes, which is weird. The aorist does take an augment, and the perfect redupes as well, but it redupes with an epsilon instead of an iota. And so there's just a little bit of stuff, a little bit of rules that you have to remember there. But once you grasp those, to be completely honest, you've got didomy. After that, it's just taking those same rules and applying what you know about all of the non-indicative verbal systems. So if you look at the subjunctive on page 326 is very easy. It's that same subjunctive thing that gives it away is that lengthened vowel. So the omicron is going to turn into an omega. But what you notice is that it uses all the same endings. You remember luo, lues, lue, luamen, luete, luusi. The same exact endings there in the figure on page 326 shows that those are the same. Those are the endings. You're just now getting didomi with them. Same thing with the middle, misai, tai, metha, esentai, and the passive. So this is nothing new. Now, if you notice at the top of page 326, there is an important note, and this is to help you identify the forms of didomy, but it says didomy has first aorist forms in the indicative and second aorist forms elsewhere. So that's one little unique thing to didomy that is not overwhelmingly complicated. It's just the fact that the first aorist forms are in the indicative, second aorist forms are everywhere else. So imperative of didomy, the imperative is the same thing. You remember tote, toson, and then to remember that in the middle and passive, you say the same thing except for with a lisp. You say those, those, thought. So those are how you remember your endings. And remember in the imperative across the board, whether didomy or not, the second singular doesn't actually have a regular imperative ending. So you just have to memorize the second singular and know that that's imperative. A good hint, if you remember, for the imperative second singular is that it's going to look really short and awkward. It's going to look like it doesn't have an ending, or that it's very short and cut off. And if it happens at the beginning of a sentence, generally you can know that's an imperative. The infinitive of didomy, same thing. The endings are extremely visibly known, the nigh, thigh endings, very easy. And then the participle of didomy. If you have forgotten the participle by now, you want to go back and remember the participle, because there are participles of didomy, and you can see them there at the bottom of your page 327, and they function just like they always do. So again, didomy outside of the indicative is not anything complicated. It's just remembering what you learned about the subjunctive, the imperative, the infinitive, the participle, and then applying that to what you learned last chapter about didomy with the reduplication in the present, with the iota, the reduplication in the perfect, but with an epsilon, the augment and the aorist, and so forth. So if you remember that stuff, you're good. But a very, very important part of this chapter, very important for you to learn to translate your Greek, but also very important specifically for tomorrow, is starting on page 328. Mounts just kind of throws in, hey, here's the rest of the conditional clauses. Now, do you remember that we learned the third class conditional in the subjunctive chapter? Because the third class conditional is made up with aeon in the subjunctive. And aeon is kind of this if any, if ever, whenever kind of a thing. But aeon here would be if, and a conditional statement is the if then. Like tonight, I told my children, I'm here at my house, and I told my children, if you get out of bed, then you will get a spanking. So conditional clause is an if then. But in Greek, the conditional clauses, the way they're structured, can actually be can tell you what the author is really trying to say. So the author is going to use certain forms of conditional clauses to help emphasize the point that's coming across. It's really actually kind of cool, but it does make it a little bit more difficult for people like you and me who are translating to identify. You just have to keep it at the front of your mind. So a third class conditional, and what you're going to use as your guide here is 35.9, which is on page 329. But what you notice is third class conditional, which is exactly what we've already learned. That's the aeon and the subjunctive. We learned that in the subjunctive chapters. That all happens in the protasis. And if you remember, the protasis is the part that's at the beginning, the if statement. The apodosis is the part that's at the end, the then statement. So when I say protasis, I mean the if statement. When I say apodosis, I mean the then statement. And those are good words, by the way, when you're doing your exegesis papers to use. The professors like hearing it. Anyway, the third class conditional is not making any call on whether the protasis is true. So the third class conditional is just making a general statement, and it's not implying whether the protasis are true or not. It's just a general if-then statement. So it's pretty popular in the New Testament to get aeon and then the subjunctive. And then what you're introduced to here is the first class conditional and the second class conditional. Now, the first class conditional is A, which is generally what you see with a conditional statement. It gives it away. When you see A, if, which is translated if, then you want to look for the conditional stuff, because that's generally going to happen. So you can see the A with the indicative in any tense, and then in the protasis, and then in the apodosis, another verb with any mood, any tense. This is going to be a first-class conditional. And what a first-class conditional is communicating from the author's perspective is that it's assuming that the protasis is true. So you can see the example there. You see the example there on page 328 at the bottom, Matthew 5:30. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Now, it doesn't necessarily, it's not arguing that this is fact. The author is saying, for the sake of argument, let's assume that the protasis is true. So if you see A with the indicative and the protasis, then you need to know that that's a first-class conditional. The author is not necessarily stating that the protasis is fact. He's just saying, for the sake of argument, let's assume the protasis is true. If it's true, then the apodosis is true. So that's a first-class conditional statement. The second-class conditional statement is a little bit different. It is actually the opposite. So it's formed with A in the indicative, just like the first-class conditional in the protasis, A in the indicative. The difference is that in the apodosis, it's on plus the indicative. And it's the same tense as the protasis. And it's always going to be past tense. The indicative is going to be a past tense verb. So these are just little things to add to your filter to help you figure out the stuff for the second class conditional. Now, the second class conditional has a little bit of a different feel. The author is trying to communicate, for the sake of argument and probably truth, is that the protasis is not true, that it is false in nature. And so you can see the example on 35.8. It says, for if they had known, they would not have crucified the Lord for glory. So the protasis is introduced with A and an indicative verb, and the protasis will normally have on and a verb in a secondary tense in the indicative. So the falseness of the protasis is assumed in the argument, in the sense that, for if they had known, it's assuming that they did not know. Okay, so the falseness of the apodosis, or protasis, not the apodosis. The protasis is assumed in a second class conditional. So those are your conditional phrases. Now, the fourth class conditional isn't actually introduced here because we don't have it in the New Testament. It's A in the optative. Matter of fact, we only have a few optative verbs in the New Testament. So he doesn't take the time to introduce it here. But really, once you grasp that, that's the end of the chapter. Oh, by the way, just a quick note as you guys think about your quiz tomorrow. On page 330, it says at the top that there is no new vocabulary for this chapter, but there's some words that are important that you can learn. Okay, I recommend that you learn those words because there is a vocab section on the quiz, and if I remember correctly, it looks a lot like this. So just telling you, but yeah. So do glance over these words. Now you should know most of them, and if you don't know most of them, you should be able to figure them out because they sound like words you already know, like hamartolos. Hamartolos is, hamartia is sin. Well, this is sinful or sinner. So to be honest, they're not horribly hard words to remember. So look through your vocab. But moving over to the actual quiz, let's go over this really quick, okay? Your Chapter 35 quiz, it is a 3-page quiz. It's 9 vocab words, and I've already guided you on that. So 9 vocab words that you need to know for this quiz. Your grammar and translation, you have 3 questions, 3 grammar questions, and you have 1 translation question. And so, yeah, I don't remember how many conditional clauses we've gone over. Oh wait, yes, 3 of them. So you have 3 grammar questions and you have 1 translation question. So just read over the chapter, know this stuff really well. And then parsing is where you're going to really get the beginning part of this chapter with all of the subjunctive, imperative, infinitive. You're going to want to know each one of those because there's 5 parsings. And in essence, let me see if I'm right. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 things, so there's going to be 1 with 2 or whatever. But he just wants to make sure that you can recognize each of these forms. And to be completely honest, you really don't have to go over the parsing at this point because you can recognize those forms. Those endings are so recognizable and so blaringly obvious that really your parsing is going to be extremely easy this week. You just have to remember what you learned last week in order to get through it. But the quiz is not difficult at all. You're not going to find anything a struggle as you go through that. But really, since I am doing this so late and no one is actually able to sign on, I'm going to keep this video extremely short today. And if you guys have any specific questions or need any specific help before the quiz tomorrow, please email me or contact me via text, which is the quickest way for me to reply. And my phone number is 904-472-5019. Feel free to contact me and ask me any questions that you may have or receive clarification about things on the video or what you might experience tomorrow. So, guys, you're almost done. This junk is seriously ending soon. You've got Chapter 36, which is odds and ends. This is where Mounts goes, oops, this didn't fit into my system. And he just throws everything into one chapter, and it's iste me, tithe me, and diknu me. So this is just a chapter of kind of all the extra fat. Even talks a little bit about the definite article. You remember that? That was a while ago. So next week we'll run over that, and then we'll have a big review for your final, and we'll be good to go. So, all right, guys. Hope you have a great quiz. And again, sorry that the tutoring got pushed off today, but I will catch you next time. All right. God bless. Bye.